Globalization. This is the video now about globalization. Is it really in a crisis now in 2020? What is globalization? How it is really successful and how we have to defend it in the coming years because it's under threat from a very strong opposition now, especially from the left who never liked it. Yeah? Because globalization basically is global freedom. It's the victory in the Cold War. It is these last 30 years which were so amazingly successful, and it's really a fantastic thing. Obviously, like all human systems and developments, it's not perfect, must be permanently improved and corrected if things have not really the success that they should. But overall, in all aspects, which I will discuss now, it's really an amazing thing. Let me explain. We had this Cold War after from the Second World War to 1990. There was a systemic competition between the free world and the socialist world, and most of the world was socialist. It was basically only 1 billion people free. The rest of the 4 billion people were in suppression, economic suppression. There was different degrees of socialism. The worst, obviously, from North Korea to Cuba to the Soviet Union, Warsaw Pact. Yeah? That was the worst. Yeah? But obviously, there were many, many other aspects, and most of the world was under a form of semi-socialist kind of alternative to market democracy. And that was, of course, disastrous for them. And, they really couldn't discover under that economic and political circumstances. Then, with the end of the Soviet Union, the end of the Warsaw Pact, it has all opened up and it was wonderful and very successful. And then in the last years, also in the Arab world, the socialist regimes have tumbled. And, of course, and also in Africa, many of them, and in Asia. And also specific cases, of course, China, which has contributed so much to global output, but still is a communist dictatorship. And that's, of course, a very specific case we will also discuss. Yeah? But nevertheless, the living standards also in China have been massively improved, and that was a major contribution to the world in the last years. And we have to defend our record of this positive phenomenon of globalization, which is basically the global victory of freedom. So the next slide is here. What is globalization? The victory in the Cold War, defeat of socialism in stages and per region. It didn't happen everywhere at once. First of all, of course, the defeat of the Nazi challenge in the Second World War, but then as I've said already, this terrible situation with the Cold War, and then in this kind of post-Cold War situation, Maastricht, EU 28, NATO enlargement, the transformation of GATT, the previous trade agreement, into the World Trade Organization. That was really very important, especially the opening of China, including in the WTO in 2001, but also the opening of India, such a great populous state, and also the end of socialism in many Latin American countries. So the establishment of African Union, ASEAN, only positive developments. And even the shocks which there came in the counter reaction from 9/11 and the big wars in Afghanistan and Iraq. There was, of course, and the Arab Spring, but mostly, it was transformative in a way that it was also leading to much more integration of these economies in the global economy. And ultimately, these are very positive developments. Yeah? Of course, we have still regional challenges. Communist China, I've mentioned already. And obviously, after 2000, the big counter action to the fall of the Soviet Union of the Systema Putin. And then we have some socialist leftovers like Syria, North Korea, Cuba, Venezuela. And there are some other ones which we have to discuss. These are, of course, sad cases. I have added actually the State of the EU trade map because then you see very well where there is really already a free trade agreement or in negotiations. And that's basically the part of the world which is fully integrated in the Western economic market democracy model. And that's the reason why we have this big success. I've updated the most important, and you don't need so many numbers in economics, just one big number is how many people live in the world, because that's a sign of prosperity, that's the sign of freedom. In a semi kind of socialist insecurity war, civil war situation, population growth cannot develop because people are afraid, they don't want to invest in the future, in the family. The conditions are far from growth, also for population. And then you have, of course, now this big benchmark, and it's quite impressive. In one generation only, we have from 1990, we were at 5.3 billion, and we are now at 7.8. And that's 30 years, and we have 2.5 billion people more. Fantastic. This is really grandiose. Yeah. And I understand the left-wing argument is we are too many, it's only poor people, we have to cut population growth, it's a very big danger. No, it's not. It's really fantastic. It's 2.5 billion people living much better in a freer world, and that's really what the world is about. Yeah? And actually, who should decide, yeah? Like they did it in the communists, who should get children or not? Yeah? It's the choice of the parents. It's the conditions which allow them to decide these things, and it's very, very, very positive. Yeah? And of course, there are some cases, maybe there is not so much choice in that, in so much poverty they live. But when you lift the people out of poverty, have more information and more access to medicine, then it's the choice. And this we have achieved globally in such an amazing time, and that's really something to be very, very proud about. And see also the global GDP output. We were at 22 trillion at victory point in 1990, and now 30 years later, we are at, let me make it a check, it's 88. I mean, this is impressive. It's 65 trillion more, 4 times more. Amazing, unbelievable progress. And that's really cool. So we should really be very proud about what was achieved in the last 30 years. Of course, 30 years is a good moment, and Corona shock as well, to think about what we can do better, where we have to correct things, which institutional answers and economic policy making answers we have to give in order to make it even better and address what didn't really work so good. So I have already said it's a very big success story. It's measurable and it's real and it's impact in numbers. Yeah? But of course, there is still war and armed conflict. Yeah? But 2019 was the first year we were under 100,000 victims in this. Okay, 100,000 is too much. But we had years with 200, 300,000, yeah, and much more in the Cold War and also in the years before. So under 100,000 is still, it's an amazing success, yeah. Of course, you can always say, it's not good enough, yeah. Oh, and it's not good enough. Every single one who dies in an armed conflict is too much. But given where we were in the last 2,000 years, yeah, that's really a quite astonishing low number. Then we say slavery. Yeah, there are still more or less 40 million living in slavery. Of course, that's a disaster. Of course, we have to address that. There is death and natural disaster. That's unfortunate. Yeah? But we have less than 10,000 in 2019. Now, of course, it's when you conclude the corona into this natural disaster category, this is much higher this year. Okay, we have to address that, and I will discuss that. Poverty index. It's still 600 million people poor. Maybe with corona, much more. Of course, economically, that's a disaster. But, it's the lowest number ever in the history, and we can be very proud about it. Death by diseases. Of course, we have to address that, but we're making significant answers to that with modern medicine, with modern science. That is the answers. Yeah? And we cannot eradicate all evil at once, all problems at once. This world is not the paradise automatically. We have to address that, and we have successfully done that. So, globalization is no magic wand, kind of magic you click and you have gone. War, disease, disaster, pollution. No, but we have made enormous progress in these last 30 years in just one generation, and we should be very, very proud about it. And what we need is a better institutional answer, more trade, more globalization, more membership in our institutions from NATO, WTO, EU, OECD, OSCE, and all the institutional answers we have addressed, we have developed successfully. We need more openness in our institutions, and we need just to hard work. It's like George W. Bush said, it's ultimately hard work. So, is globalization perfect compared to what? Compared to the time before the First World War, to the First Cold War, or whatever. There was no kind of magic time, the Napoleon times, or, the 19th century where everybody lived in happiness and peace and prosperity. This didn't happen, yeah. And the time in the First Cold War was very hard, yeah. And we are now in the Second Cold War, and we have this challenge from hostile Russia. We have China, this communist mercantilism, and with these very low standards from human rights to food safety. And we have these wars in Syria, Libya, the collapse of socialist Venezuela. There is the Iran exporting Islamic terrorism, and Assad, this disaster. There is really a lot of things which are going wrong in this world, but it's not the guilt and the responsibility of this phenomenon of globalization, of global freedom, but it's specific regimes of terror and of political alternative authoritarianism which are the reasons for these problems. So we have certain arrogance, incompetence, revanchist powers, yeah, and that's the problem. Russia is definitely falling into this category, but also China, and both claim global power, talk about the multipolar world, wanna have power in the world, and to do what? To do what? To impose their visions of global leadership by them on us? you know, what kind of world would that be? Would that be a fantastic world if we live under Chinese standards or under Chinese orders? Yeah, and we anyhow won't do that. Yeah? But this kind of multipolar world, which they say, or this kind of revanchist and mixed with incompetence, yeah, like we see Syria. Oh, we will help Assad, yeah, no, with barrel bombs, yeah, or China now with the coronavirus. This is all totally wrong. They should be a little bit modest, see that they're still ultimately developing countries, rather about the same prosperity level, about 25% of the European and American level, and they really should see a little bit that they develop better life for their own citizens. I mean, that's the task of governments everywhere. And all this Kaiser Wilhelm kind of attitudes of Putin and others. This is really, we have to see a place on the sunlight, yeah, and then all these kind of global fantasies of their time has come. This is really very, very dangerous, yeah, because the Western institutions are open also for the Russians and for the Chinese and for everybody who keeps the rules. And we have not set any kind of dangerous rules or so, yeah? Just, reasonable, responsible standards. So, compared to what? I have said that already. Globalization perfect. Yes, we have to fine tune it to get it right, yeah? We have to address the issues from Ukraine, Syria, Libya, Yemen, Afghanistan, yeah? The human rights, of course, defended. There is also the question of democracy and political participation, migration, labor standards, competition, property rights, rule of law, global food standards, climate and environment, animal welfare, pandemics, vaccinations, inequality, global good governance. This is really what we have to do, and I will also go then through details what kind of regional and global governance questions we have to do. And yes, we need better governance, and yes, we need global good governance, absolutely. And we have to address exactly which institutions have to do what, and we have to really improve them as well. The point is about wars, yeah? It's not only during Corona, but long term by stronger NATO and NATO global partnership. That's really very important. We have significantly reduced the deaths, were close to 230,000, and now we are below 100,000, yeah? And let's also see where exactly are the conflict points. Venezuela, Mexico, Libya, Saudi Arabia, Yemen, Syria. Then you see Afghanistan, Pakistan, this area, Somalia. There are specific areas and countries where there are these wars and conflicts, and where most of the deaths from conflict and war are happening. It's not that globalization and war or something goes hand in hand. No, there are specific governance issues. In Mexico, the trade war. In Venezuela, socialism. In Libya, the breakdown of governance after the intervention, because we didn't really have a plan what to do with Libya afterwards. Syria, the civil war, non-intervention. The withdrawal from Afghanistan. Iran and its role in Yemen. Yeah? Then you see certain specific countries, Congo, where there was never really very good governance. These are countries specifically they must be addressed. Or Ukraine with the attack of Russia. I mean, these are very specific political issues. Yeah, they are not connected with globalization. They are connected with political decisions of their elites or of other countries, neighbors who are invading these countries. Yeah, human rights. Human rights, yes, let's address this. But where actually is the problem? Let's see at the Human Rights Index. Yeah, it's not that everywhere in the world the human rights situation is much worse. No, 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 it's much better everywhere. But it's specific countries where it's problematic. In Russia, in China, in Iran, in Pakistan and Afghanistan, in Saudi Arabia, in parts of East Africa. These are the issues. Let's address it. Let's ask them. Let's get really on the feet of the decision makers in these countries. Because it's not that globalization is leading to worse human rights. No, it's actually much different. It's leading to better human rights. But if specific political elites, from let's say Libya to Egypt, or from Russia to China, from Iran to Congo, are not keeping them, they have all promised that in the UN Charter, then let's ask them harder. Let's make it clearer. We have less patience for that. Democracy and political participation in decline. Yeah, but where exactly? Yeah, in Canada, in Australia, in Europe. I mean, we have such an exaggerated debate about Poland, the democracy. Yeah? There is specific issues in Poland. We have to address them. This peace party is really doing a lot of wrong things. Yeah, okay, good. But where is really the problem? In Russia, in China, in Iran, in Saudi Arabia, in Congo. These are the big issues. So let's address them, but not let's blame the globalization has led to a fall in democratic values. This is really left-wing propaganda at its worst. Migration and labor standards. Sure, absolutely. We need to be more open. We need to reduce the informal markets. Yeah, we need to make sure there is regulation and support in that one. Yeah, we have a lot of migration in the world, and it's really an opportunity to help these people to be better integrated and to give them more opportunities. Yeah, under a Western free market economy, everybody by time can be a productive asset. He comes from Syria, comes into the European market, you train him, you learn him, you give him opportunities, you give him legal rights to stay and to work, and he will contribute. I mean, we are creating our own problems by excluding them from the labor market, by giving them only temporary kind of rights, and then we hope that they return. Totally illusionary. We have to help people and we have to give them opportunities. And then they will not stand up in the welfare system or forever be in this kind of subsistence. No, they will be contributing. We have to be more open. And we have to avoid millions of Ukrainians being without rights in the European labor market. In Corona, we sent them back. I mean, that's a disgrace. Yeah? They are here, they are Europeans, let them work. Yes, let them work. There's enough work in Europe. Or let's be open, much more open, and at the same time to give the production opportunities to these countries. Because it's our own protectionism which leads to their tragic mistake. Yeah? That then the production has to be, meat production has to be in Germany. Okay, then the Ukrainian workers come to Germany. Why can we not have the meat production in Ukraine from the start? And just bring the goods? It's our protectionism which creates many problems here. Competition, property rights, rule of law, the enforceability of contracts and all these things. I think we have to really promote the fundamentals of the market economy much better globally. There's a lot of progress on that already, but we have to work with the OECD and make sure that our standards is not something mean. Yeah, everybody in the world wants to have its contracts enforced. Yeah, and its property protected. Yeah. There's no Chinese way to it. Anybody can take my property, or anybody in Russia to be happy if somebody takes his things. Yeah, Property rights are universal. We have to help, and we have to be sure that our institutions are more open to include them. OECD enlargement, very important. Get Brazil and Argentina in. Make sure that China applies and also help them to reach these standards. That's very good for their consumers, for their citizens. Global Food Safety Agency. I have made that case already. Global food safety is very important. We have seen that now in Corona, when the food standards in some countries are bad, and you suddenly have a crisis. So global food safety is also something we have to invest more. Maybe we're a bit lax on that one. But this is what we do with free trade agreements. The EU is very much insisting on that. And that's very good. Global climate and one global environment. I think we anyhow do a lot in that one with the Green Deal and everything. And obviously, with 8 million people, the consumption levels are higher. But it's not globalization per se to blame. There is this challenge of global warming. Let's address it. But with technology, not with communism, not with limits, but with better productivity. That's the way, and not with panic. We will have also, let me just remind you, we just had to clean up the whole of Eastern Europe from the European taxpayers, with this kind of tragic heritage of disaster of socialism, destroying the environment from Czech Republic to the Baltics to Romania, a disastrous legacy of communist industrialization. And now it's much more cleaner. It was really a tremendous effect positively on the environment to end socialism. And this is really very good. And now we have more tasks. Okay, we will do it. But rationally, economically, reasonable. And we will be very successful also with this challenge. Animal welfare. There is already a global World Organization for Animal Health. Established 1924. We probably have to take that much more seriously when we see now in this pandemic. And we have to make sure there is more funding, that this is maybe a UN organization as well. And we really to organize and to support. Standards matter, and they are really very important, and they have to be enforceable. We cannot have this global shock just because somebody in China eats a bat. A global CDC. I believe also in institutional competition. We have the World Health Organization, but it seems to be a little bit not so well working. So let's have a global Center for Disease Control, and then let's compete it with the WHO. When they were not really so successful now, let's have competition. Let's have a second organization who is really just focused on that one. We also have in Austria or in Europe a health ministry, and we have an agency for disease control, for public health. We have it in the EU. We have a DG for health, and we also have the Center for Disease Control. So let's have, next to the WTO, also a Center for Disease Control. A global agency for vaccination, we have learned this is necessary. There were some people who were opposed to it because they said it's too expensive, it's too much a niche topic. No, we need that. Vaccinations really matter, and we have to fight all this nonsense of anti-vax, and we have to be securing. It's like an insurance policy against such a global pandemic. There might be one pandemic which might be much more dangerous, much more lethal than Corona. So we have to be much better prepared, and we have to take that very seriously. I call as well to end of lockdowns. They really kill the private sector and the SMEs, and that's something I personally think is very important, to have mandatory vaccinations for all key sectors, and everybody who is out there talking and working with a lot of people, from schools to public servants to the tourism sector. Yes, we can ask mandatory things. We had mandatory lockdowns. We have police who are making sure that these restrictions are really done. We give fines, and we can do mandatory vaccinations for specific sectors. If you want to work in a restaurant, if you want to be a school teacher, you have to vaccinate. There is no reason not to vaccinate. There is absolutely no reason for that, and we should be much stricter to that. That belongs also to a more regulated globalization. Freedom, absolutely. Individual freedom, 100%, but also with responsibility. And when we have diseases, we have to fight them. Anybody can carry diseases. our modern science works, these vaccines are safe, and so please vaccinate. Coming back to extreme poverty and inequality between nations and regions, we went really a lot and we have all these millennium goals and we have much more increased our development aid, and that's very good so. And we have really massively decreased global poverty and also global inequality. What is now this big debate of the left is basically global jealousy. That not everybody can be as rich as some super billionaires from the US or some Arabian sheikhs. Good, that's very sad. Also, me, I would like to have a yacht and drive around the whole year, but this is not the reality. We have to do all this on the basis of property rights, market economy, and some reasonable level of redistributions and open opportunities. But not, to because you see there's more millionaires now living in America, we have to tax them harder, higher, and take it from the rich, eat the rich. I mean, this is not the way to create prosperity. And only in a very prosperous society we can have really equal opportunities for everybody. This is what we want? Yes, then let's get prosperous together and not kill the market economy and globalization like some of these bored academics seem to suggest. More or less globalization post-corona. Yes, we need much more globalization. We have no end of globalization post-corona, on the contrary. But we have to address the issues which I discussed. Yeah? It's 11 issues. They are important. They are many. That's not so easy to address. But, we have overcome the Soviet Union. We have overcome before the Nazis. Yeah? And we will overcome also the specific fine-tuning issues with which we face now. And it will not be all solved. There will be still slavery in 10 years. There will be still poverty in 10 years. There will be still environmental pollution. And there will be still problems from animal welfare to climate change. But we will go much further. We will further increase the prosperity levels. There will be billions and trillions added to global GDP. More people will be there living in higher levels of prosperities and in less poverty in the next 10 years. Yeah? So it's important to believe in the basis of our system, the free market democracies. They are really delivering. And that's what globalization is about. That's what we have achieved. What we need is global good governance. Yeah. There's a lot of conspiracy theory, too much global governance. That's all complete nonsense. Yeah. Obviously, we don't need a global government in that sense in the UN, but we need global good governance because that's really freedom. Freedom requires protection. Freedom requires rules. Freedom requires also that somebody is ensuring that the rules are kept. There must be courts, there must be police, there must be also rules bound. Yeah? And we need these rules and we need global institutions to manage good. I have in 4 different levels, I will discuss that. We need the UN to be reformed. Yeah? We need the UN to be stronger, and we need that it really reassesses a little bit decision making, because the idea that Russia and China are so dominant there as powers on other trajectory and basically having inherited these seeds from the World War II. In the case of Russia, it's very questionable that they are at all in the Soviet Union seat, and also the seat for the Chinese was meant for the free China, not for the communist China. And now they veto a lot of important progress and behave like the world would be theirs. Yeah? And that's certainly not the case. Yeah? And then we have also to work much more with the OECD as a union for market democracies, and to enlarge it more and to compete with the UN. Yes, to compete. But the UN is blocked by China and Russia. Okay, let's work with the OECD. We can do that. Competition works. We also have to foster a system of regional integration like the EU is. That's really very important. Make the EU stronger, support it, include also Ukraine and the Balkans, and also promote the cooperation of the EU with the Organization of American States, ASEAN, with African Union, the Organization of Islamic State, and the Commonwealth of Nations. So it's basically 10 international big bodies together with China, Russia, and the US and also India. So it's 10 regional organizations. I will call it like this, and I will also explain that in the next presentation. But the OECD, the Union of Market Democracies, enlarge it and make it stronger. And also we have to focus on these very specific 15 problematic states to reform exactly those and to define the problems we have really also as their problems, not a problem of globalization, but this is a problem of Russia, of China, of Cuba, of Venezuela, of Iran, and similar states. Yeah, that is basically then the next presentation. That was now the first one to discuss about the four pillars of global good governance and the issues of globalization. But let me conclude. Globalization is a really fantastic phenomenon. Progress of freedom, prosperity towards now 8 billion at 86 trillion GDP. That's really wonderful. We need more of it. And in another 30 years, when I will be still alive and make another video like this, we will have even much better success. And this will be really wonderful. And in between, let's address the specific issues I've outlined in this presentation. Thanks a lot for your attention.